Hello, Brad here, just to say we're super proud that the Friday 5pm podcast is sponsored by the Malt Miller, the UK's best home brew store.
We use the Malt Miller for all of our homebrew experiments, as well as tapping them up for advice and binging on their awesome YouTube channel all the time.
That's why whenever we release a homebrew video, we put a recipe kit live on the Malt Miller, so you can brew with the exact same amazing ingredients that we did. The same ingredients used by pro brewers.
So alongside the Malt Miller's nitro-flushed hops, cold-stored yeast and milled-to-order malts, you can pick up recipe kits for our 5 Points Best Bitter, Russian River West Coast IPA, and now the fastest beer in the world, a hazy session IPA that goes from grain to glass in less than 48 hours.
Sign up to their newsletter at tinyurl.com/Malt Miller to get 5% off your first order. With the Malt Miller's amazing customer service and Johnny's 48-hour recipe, you could order the ingredients on a Monday and be drinking the beer by the weekend.
Speaking of which, it's Friday.
It's 5pm.
So enjoy this week's Friday 5pm podcast.
I love that stuff. Been drinking it for years. Drinking it for years. Drinking it for years. Drinking it for years. You know, I heard they recently decided to add more hops to it. Hops to it. You know, I heard they recently decided to add more hops to it. Hops to it.
Hello and welcome to episode 2 of The Bubble. This week we have Tim Anderson, former Masterchef winner and the owner of Namban, a lovely ramen restaurant in Brixton. So Tim sort of came in to chat to us about sort of his background in beer, managing the Euston Tap, winning Masterchef and opening a restaurant, and how beer sort of fitted into that and how beer fits into restaurant culture and beer and food. And I think I was pretty surprised with the outcome.
Yeah, I mean, when we planned this podcast, I wanted to talk to Tim, A, because he's an astonishing chef, B, because he used to run the Euston Tap, which back when he was running it was one of the only and certainly the premier craft beer bar in London. And thirdly, because I thought, being a beer lover who owned a restaurant, he would be dead behind the idea of beer and food matching. As it turned out, he's kind of dead against the idea of beer and food matching. We won't spoil what his approach is. He still believes in it, but he takes a very different approach to what I expected him to do, and for what maybe I would say and champion. But then as you listen to him talk, you start to realise he's 100% right.
Yeah, he knows what he's talking about. And it wasn't really the outcome I think either of us expected, but I suppose that's why we're doing this, is to dig a little bit deeper and find out a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, really, if this bubble concept that we have is working, we should be being proved wrong the whole time. It should show that the bubble's slightly out of touch, and the way it really is this. And I think that's really what happened. Episode
1 and 2 have done that,
yeah.
Which is good. So this is episode 2, Tim Anderson of Namban, speaking about beer, food, and what makes him tick. So when were you at the Euston Tap?
When was I working there?
Yeah.
Or when was I most recently drinking there?
Let's go for most recently drinking there.
Actually, it's been a while, because I'm not usually in the area anymore. If I have a train coming in and out of Euston, I make a point, if I can, to have a drink before
Critique
or after.
It. Go in and be like, wasn't like that in my day.
Well, oh my God, it wasn't great when I was there either. To be totally fair, they've got a great range in a lovely building. The interior always needs a bit of work. Always.
Have you been in the second? The second turret that used to be the cider tap
I've never been
is much nicer.
Is it?
It feels like they meant to put a bar in there, whereas the other one's a little bit more accidental.
The toilet is the weirdest thing in the world. You know, my urinal, and it feels like it's
that tiny one.
It's big enough.
Yeah.
It feels like it should fit 2, and then a second person squeezes in.
Yeah.
You're really close to me when you're going to the toilet.
Suddenly your pipes clock up, and you're like, nope.
No. So I got a great toilet story a couple from the Euston Tap, actually, because it doesn't have great plumbing, the Euston Tap. It was never meant to be a bar, a pub, or anything. So the drains, as we discovered kind of too late, didn't go anywhere. They basically went into a big pit in the ground, like a hole.
Well, like next to the cellar?
Like under, I guess so. Like outside the cellar, which is well contained. Don't worry about that. But yeah, we there was a manhole cover in the floor in the Euston Tap that started bubbling up one night, and we had to like get everybody out. And,
What did you tell the customers?
we didn't have to tell them anything because they could smell it. they just left. Actually, they didn't leave. This is the best thing about that story is that everybody just stayed and drank their beer and kind of like they went to the other side of their bar to get the next
I
round.
paid for it. I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah, but they'd stay and have another drink. Like this is a testament to actually how good the Euston Tap is. We had great beer and good vibes. We had people in the garden leaning through the window to place orders and get their beers.
Sniffing their hands while they're drinking.
But anyway, we had to get it pumped a few times, and the things we found when they pumped it out were ridiculous. Like there were nappies and wigs. I
would love to know the story of that wig.
I think there was a brassiere, like a bra. I don't know why I said brassiere like it's 1920. But yeah, they pulled all kinds of stuff out of there, and as far as I know, it's fine now. But yeah, the other couple things that happened with the toilets themselves was one night they got clogged, and of course we realized, again, too late, that we didn't have a plunger. So I had to double wrap my arm in bin bags and excavate by hand.
I'd be hoping for a wig at that point.
So that was nasty, and I think you have to do that. I think that's like a rite of passage, though.
In the pub game, you need some horrible, horrible toilet stories. It always just amazes me. It's like how they can be in that state.
Right.
Like,
like what did you do? Like what did you eat, man?
Sat on the toilet like AC Slater from Saved by the Bell or something.
Right. But that's not even the worst thing that happened. The worst thing that happened was some guy came in one day, and he was like, usually we just don't let. We make a judgment call on whether or not we use the toilet. But I know that Euston Station you have to pay, and like there's no other toilets around, so we're quite nice about it usually. And this guy came in, like I kind of couldn't tell if he was like a hipster or a vagrant.
Yeah, it's a fine line. Yeah.
And I was like, well, this guy seems cool. Yeah, you can use the toilet. And like 20 minutes later, I forgot about this guy, and somebody comes down, and somebody was like, there's been a guy in the bathroom for 20 minutes. I was like, oh my god. So I went up there and I banged on the door, and he was like, yeah, I'm coming out. And 5 minutes go by, and I'm like, this guy's not coming out. So I had to unlock the door, open it, and he was in there smoking crack with his pants down.
I didn't know you could smoke crack.
With your pants down? Or
just in general? I'm going to try it.
Yeah, so I had to kind of forcibly eject him from the toilet and then the premises.
Did you let him put his pants up?
Of course, yeah. No. But he was reluctant to do so. I don't know. So yeah, that's the Euston Tap. That was back in 2011.
That's when you were managing it?
That was when I was managing it.
And how long were you in that role for?
About 6 months. So I got that when I was filming Masterchef, which was throughout 2010. I was working for Whole Foods as a beer buyer, which was really like a glorified assistant manager job at their Stoke Newington branch. So I quit that job because they didn't like me taking time off to film MasterChef anyway. And then when the filming wrapped, I had to find a job, and I applied for that one at the Euston Tap. It was an assistant manager job.
Yeah.
And I'd never worked in a pub or hospitality or a restaurant or anything in my life at that point. So I was just like, I'm not going to get this job, but whatever. I know about beer. So and I got the job as assistant manager, and I was trained up. But then like a week or two later, the manager at that time was fired. So all of a sudden...
Was he the dude smoking crack?
No. He was... People who know the Euston Tap will know who I'm talking about. So I probably shouldn't go into detail. But the last straw, I think this is kind of funny. Basically, he had a bit of a lock-in, and we had these like faucet-style taps for the cask.
Oh, yeah.
And he left one open. It was a cask of Raven... Thornbridge Raven, the black
Wild Raven, yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know why. I feel like that beer in particular just makes it funnier. Like, yeah, he left it open, ruined the floor, wasted a whole cask. But then I was the manager of the Euston Tap. There was another guy who was helping me, who was hired as like a co-manager. That's another story. But basically, yeah, I was kind of thrown in the deep end, doing something I'd not done before. There was 1 week, I remember I didn't order enough beer. Like, I barely ordered enough beer. By Monday, we had, like, maybe 6 casks left in the cellar that I don't think had been tapped yet or anything. But yeah, and also for whatever reason, like we got a pallet of Dark Star. So like by Sunday evening, like it was just all Dark Star.
Dark Star Tap takeover.
It settles really quick through Dark Star,
It
so you
does,
can just
yeah.
be like, I haven't vented it.
Yeah. But you know, we sold beer, we stayed open. Maybe didn't have the range that everybody wanted us to have that weekend, but you live and learn.
Yeah. What type of stuff were you selling back then?
Well, we had a lot of Thornbridge. We always had at least one Thornbridge on. Wild Swan was a big one because back then they had a pricing structure based on ABV, and I think you could get a pint of Wild Swan for like $3.50.
Yeah, it'd be probably less even.
Yeah, it was really, really low. So we sold a lot of that. We had our house lager was Bernard Czech lager.
I think it still is, isn't it?
I think it is, yeah, because they've got the owner Jamie Hawksworth. I think has a deal with them, and that's what they sell at Pivney in York and all the other various taps. Yeah. And it's a great lager actually, and they did a dark one and a few other versions. Krušovice we had for a while. That was the other Czech one we had. We had Mars, Weissbier a lot. We had Westmalle.
On draft?
Yeah, on draft, which was amazing. Like
it's still a joy to find that.
It is, yeah.
There is a pub quite near here called the Chesham, and the guy just loves Westmalle. And he just has it's like a community boozer.
Yeah.
It's not like super craft forward. He just likes like an independent range. But he just was like, I love Westmalle, so Westmalle's staying on. And it's so nice to go in. It's got a fire as well, so like when the fire's lit in the winter, pint of Westmalle.
Pint of what? You monster.
Yeah. There's nothing wrong with that,
Nothing better than it, mate.
A pint of Westmalle. Yeah, but then, so we had I think it was 2/3 keg, and then the rest was cask. And we had some great cask. We had, the one I always got excited about was Bristol Acer, which was one of the first Sriracha Ace beers I had. And it was also during this time when everybody was doing these like 3.9% hoppy golden ales.
Yeah.
And like they were amazing. Like Wild Swan was one of them. Camden Inner City Green.
Yeah, it's their first beer, wasn't it?
Was it?
Yeah.
That was amazing. Like I was upset when they stopped doing that.
But they've re-released it now.
Have they?
Post AB InBev, because they need to keep their origin story going. They've re-released it. It's a summer release now, I think.
It's such a shame you never see them around. Like Hell's is everywhere. You get the wit and the pale everywhere. But I lost. I kind of. There's a dog barking. Is that?
That's Rob's dog. It's the guard dog.
I kind of, I'm not, for whatever reason, like, I feel like they're not promoting their other beers enough, you know? Because I'd love to see IHL around, if they even still brew that. I don't know.
It's not the beer it was.
No?
But it's InBev sort of rolling out what they can mass market, and that's Hell's. So the other bits keep them slightly relevant and a bit of romanticism for the older customers like us, but don't make any money from it. They can't push it out globally, so it's not in InBev's nature, I suppose.
No, that's a shame. That was a great beer.
And what about sort of American imports? Because I think that's why I started drinking at the tap, like those Lagunitas.
Yeah, the main thing I remember about that back then was that they were super expensive, so we didn't sell very many. Especially because we had such a good cask offering, and all those were really cheap, like £4 a pint. For really good stuff. Oh, we also got in a lot of summer wine and Buxton.
Yeah.
And summer wine was really hoppy back then. They were like crazy. But anyway, we American wines, we had a lot of Anchor. And we had a lot of bottles from Stone, Sierra Nevada.
Odell would have been quite big back then.
Odell we had a lot of, but all this beer would go out of date because nobody bought it. Mainly because of the price. I remember we had an amazing selection, amazing range that the original manager ordered in of Hop and Frog.
Really?
Yeah, like amazing.
Back in 2010, 2011?
Yeah. They had Boris and the Wee Heavy and all this stuff, but nobody touched it. Partly because they had really bad branding, like the bottles just don't look.
They
very
still
good.
do, yeah.
But amazing beers.
Yeah.
And I remember like when they went out of date, we were like, well, we have to drink these now. So
yes,
we had a bit of a session on Hop and Frog one night, messy night.
Where did the sort of beer journey begin for you then? Because obviously if you were at Whole Foods buying beer for them, you must have had a bit of a prelim into that.
It was a hobby. I mean, I grew up and in high school I never liked beer when I was a kid.
Where did you grow up?
Wisconsin, in a city called Racine, which is south of Milwaukee. And at parties in high school, everybody would have like Pabst and even worse things like natural ice and Old Milwaukee. Milwaukee's best. Terrible, terrible, cheap, awful lagers. Although I do have a real soft spot for hams. Anyway, I grew up not liking beer.
Hams is a beer, just for
not the. I like ham as well.
Everyone's getting drunk, and you're just in the corner with a large ham.
Yeah, on the bone. But yeah, so I would take sips of beer at parties and stuff, and I never liked it because like it was terrible beer. And then I can't remember who it was. It was like a mix of a few things. It was mainly my dad. When I got older, he started drinking like better beer, like he'd have at home Sierra Nevada and Sam Adams, and this brewery Leinenkugels, which is owned by Miller, but they do some really silly stuff, like a blueberry wheat beer and a shandy, but they do some really awesome, like solid kind of Germanic styles as well, like a Schwartz beer and amber lager. So I started drinking those, and I was like, oh, I actually kind of like this. And then I had a college professor who was also into beer, and he was like a home brewer and stuff, and he told me about Beer Advocate, the website. And he was like, you should check it out. It's like, you can leave reviews and stuff. So I did, and that's how I like taught myself about beer, through Beer Advocate, through the like Beer 101 stuff, and then just trying things. Because you could get really good beer. I was living in LA at that point. I was in college, and you could get really good beer just kind of anywhere, any liquor store. That you could get Stone, you could get Anderson Valley, you could get Rogue. Rogue was really big back then. So I just kind of started picking things up and trying them. And I remember the beer that like really, really, really like got me into beer was Old Rasputin, the Russian Imperial Stout from North Coast, because I had it at a sports bar actually, and I was like, "This is
it's a dangerous mix, sports and Old Rasputin."
Yeah, and I wrote my first beer review of that on a napkin, and then I put it in Beer Advocate later. And just went from there, and then I started writing reviews. I was like a beer ticker type person, really obnoxious. But I used that to get my first beer job, which was as a salesman for a company that was importing Danish craft beer. But that was back in 2009, and it hadn't really taken off yet, the whole craft beer thing. So nobody wanted it. And also I was a terrible salesman. But that was my first beer job, and I got that just because I knew about beer. And then I used that to get the job at Whole Foods and then Euston Tap. So that's my beer journey.
The beer journey.
And so you said you were working at Whole Foods and they weren't so sympathetic with your filming of Masterchef. So
No.
we've touched on it, but that's what's led you on your, well, not necessarily new path, but the current path you're on. So Masterchef is now, I think, you must have been one of the original new series of that, and it's now absolutely exploded.
Well, yeah. I mean, I was the seventh series in the new series, but I was the first year that they went to BBC One. So that series, like, objectively, I feel is a really good one because they had a big budget. They went to a new studio. There was a lot of big travel. We went to Australia, New York, and Madrid, and Inverness. Where else did we go? No, it was an amazing series and a lot of great opportunities. But yeah, that for me was obviously a big year, but it is for anybody. I just can't believe how long the show's been going. I'm a little bit out of the loop, to be honest, because they used to have more events surrounding MasterChef that would involve the contestants. But yeah, to be honest, I haven't met any of the winners from the past.
Do you not have like a reunion every so often and get together?
There are these events every now and again where you see people.
I was joking, but
No. I see Dhruv a lot. I mean, not a lot. He won the year before me. I mean, yeah, we all know each other.
How did you get involved in it?
I was a fan of the show when I first moved here. I started watching it the year Matt Follis won, who is from New Zealand. And then I watched Dhruv win, and the year that Dhruv won, I was like, this looks like fun. I'll apply. And I went online, and I took 20 minutes and applied, and then I forgot about it. Like, I didn't have great ambitions. I was like, this might be a cool, interesting, weird thing to do. And then I didn't think I'd get on the show because they have tens of thousands of applicants. But then I did, after a long sort of interview and audition process.
What was your cooking experience before then? You were just a home cook?
None. You're not allowed to have had any professional experience. Like, I worked in a sub sandwich shop in Minneapolis.
Cheap.
I think one of the guys who was on my series, Tom Whitaker, I think he worked in a Burger King for a while.
You must be really good at writing cover letters.
Yeah.
I think that's it, because I was thinking, like, man, like, I must have done well on my application.
Yeah, definitely.
But imagine how many really great cooks there are who aren't going to get on the show and then obviously not going to win because they can't sell themselves.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
That's a big thing. So it was. I was every step of the way I was surprised.
Yeah.
Like, I was surprised I got on. I was surprised I got through every time, and I was super surprised I won. I didn't expect that.
Were you really foodie at the time as well?
But I didn't really know anything. Like, I would cook a lot at home, and I've always been interested in, like, trying out new flavors, and always been into Japanese food in particular. But I didn't eat at a lot of nice restaurants or anything back then. Like, I knew a lot of the guys on that show, the contestants, like, were super foodie and always going to quite fine dining kind of places. But, like, I was just messing around, basically.
You were going to work and picking out wigs from toilets after a
Yeah.
long day of filming. They're like,
Yeah.
While the others are at Le Gavroche learning.
Right.
So, I mean, I vaguely remember the season that you were on.
Yeah.
And what I took away from that was that you did cook with beer.
I did, yeah. By the way, what are we drinking? This is really...
So this is Supernova by Vizet. So it's a new kind of upstart Belgian brewery. And it's their Belgian blonde. Supernova stands for no American hops. So it's all European hops, Belgian yeast strain. Kind of like Taras Bulba, a little bit fruitier.
It does taste
where
very
it sits.
Belgian.
Yeah.
It's lovely. Anyway, yeah, I cooked a bit with beer, just because that's what I...
what beer did you cook with? Do you remember?
I remember I used a Schlenkerla, one of the route beers,
amazing.
in a pork dish to get the smoky flavor in, which is really useful for cooking.
It kind of tastes like a bacon sandwich
It
anyway,
does,
doesn't it? So it lends itself to it.
I did. I used a fair amount of stout, again with red meats. I can't remember exactly what I did with them now, but then I also used Lindemann's cassis in a dessert. Like, I made a kind of black currant compote with that as the cooking liquid, which was really, really, really delicious, actually. Like, I really like Lindemann's cassis, actually. It's like, I think it's just kind of fun.
Yeah, I mean, all that whole range by Lindemann's, like the sweetened stuff, is undeniably delicious for a bottle, and then
Some of it is a bit, like, I don't like Pécheresse very much.
People love Pesh.
Do they?
Pesh is a big seller.
It's also like a weird, creepy bottle, you know?
it is.
It is
Yeah.
a bit. It's
I
actually
think
kind
Portman
of
Group should have a word.
have a word.
But I love their Mikkeller collaborations as well. The basil one.
Spontan
man,
pesto,
that
yeah.
is so good.
Yeah. And the elderflower one was really, really good, too.
I've never eaten it with a pizza, but every time I drink it, I'm like, I just need to get like a big margarita with this.
Yeah.
It's so tasty.
So did you watch? Because I remember maybe 2 or 3 seasons ago. I'm actually quite a MasterChef fan, actually, and I'm going to betray this now. Somebody cooked a stew, and they cooked it with a hoppy beer.
Oh, dear.
Which is, for those at home, a newbie error.
Big no-no.
Yeah. And nobody on MasterChef could work out why it tasted slightly bitter and acrid. And they
You're
were like,
kidding.
oh, well, I think you've burnt the onions. And I was just screaming at the TV going, as a chef, how can you not know this? I think it was MasterChef The Professionals.
Nobody cooks with beer.
No.
It's considered a really weird thing if you cook with beer. I grew up with it because we in Wisconsin we make bratwurst. We have a very specific kind of bratwurst that we make in Wisconsin, which I honestly think is better than the German version. It's coarser and fattier and has more seasoning. But we always parboil them in beer with onions. And we usually just do it with crap lager, you know. But
Yeah.
even if you use the wrong crap lager, it's too bitter.
Yep.
And I learned that when I was a teenager. Like, for me, it's almost second nature. Like, because there's good flavor in beer, but you do have to know. You can't just reach for any beer.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I don't know. It's always been weird to me why everybody drinks it and nobody cooks with it.
Well, because we cook with wine the whole time.
Yeah.
It's seen as, risottos, coq au vin, Cocoa beer with a Duchess or something is magnificent.
I guess there are two.
What are you laughing at me for?
Beer.
Cocoa beer.
Oh, that'd be good with like a Duchesse de Bourgogne or something.
Yeah.
But no, there's two big stumbling blocks with beer, and one is the color. Like I think it's generally better to cook with dark beers, and that turns your food brown. And also the bitterness, and also like even if it's not a particularly bitter beer, the heat and reducing things and stuff like that, it will amplify it.
As Johnny said about putting in the hoppy beer into your stew or whatever, you could get this lovely hoppy beer, and the smell of it is like, that's going to taste great. But once you boil it down and reduce it, all you're left with is bitterness.
Also, especially with a lot of the new super fruity New World hops, they can be really weird. Like, I made beer bratwurst recently, and I cooked with a Village's, their new APA, a Coyote,
right?
Which is super mango-y. And I didn't really notice it when I was drinking it, but that's the beer I had, so I cooked my bratwurst in it. And then you had these bratwursts that tasted a bit tropical, which was weird. But put enough sauerkraut on it, and you didn't notice. But I think, and I've always said this. I think that there's a much, and I think science would have my back on this, but I just think there's a much broader range of flavors you get from beer, as opposed to wine, which is why it's harder to cook with, because you don't know, unless you know the beer really well and have cooked with it before, you don't know what it's going to be like, And
it's more complex, I suppose.
A lot more
liquid,
complex.
It's got double the ingredients.
Exactly.
So you just can't.
It's got twice the opportunity, but also twice the risk.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you know how it's going to end up after it's been exposed to so much heat or long periods of time or whatever? So it can be quite volatile.
Yeah. No, I think the best beers to cook with are generally dark beers and sour beers, because they don't tend to go as bitter. And the flavors, I think, just match.
Yeah, I mean, because hoppy beers are also very volatile, so I think you can lose the flavour and the aroma very, very quickly.
True, yeah.
Whereas a dark beer, it's mostly sugar and malt based. So.
I mean, one of the good things about, or one of the main reasons that you should cook with, like, cooking lager is because all you want usually from a beer in a basic recipe is that malty sweetness and just a little bit of it, which is why they work, and you really shouldn't be bothering with anything special. There's other things like, one of the best examples is carbonade, the Belgian stew, which is made with Flemish red.
Yeah.
Like, that's very specific. You need that acidity from it. But yeah, usually if a recipe calls for beer and just beer, you just got to go with the most basic.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
stuff,
if you start putting special stuff into your fish batter,
right? Yeah.
You're an idiot. Yeah. Although I would quite like to try
the basil lambic.
Yeah, that could work.
In a fish batter might be awesome, actually.
There's a certain irony behind going on about hoppy beers and drinking them fresh and not getting them exposed to light or heat and keeping them in your cellar and then just chucking it in a stew and boiling it.
So what was the final of MasterChef like? Because it's pretty pressured to watch. Do you remember much of it?
Yeah, the final was actually it was hard. All the challenges were hard. There wasn't a challenge where I thought, like, that was a piece of piss. Like, they're challenges, and also, if you're not a professional chef or a trained chef, you don't know what you're doing. Like, every challenge, you're just like making it up as you go. But yeah, the final, because they often don't give you a lot of prep time. For the final, they gave us a week off so that we could practice. So I have a long story which I will tell.
Dude, we can cut it out if it's rubbish, so
Long
just go for it.
story short, I had this day, I took a week, I took 4 days, and the first day I practiced my starter, second day my main, third day my dessert. And then the fourth day, I wanted to practice all three and try to get it done in 3 hours, which is the time limit. So I had everything ready, I had all the ingredients ready to go, lined out, and then I realized, and I got up in the morning, I had my pajamas on, and I was just going to cook, like I was ready to go. And then I realized I didn't have any butter, so I was like, put some change in my pocket, pop out, get some butter, come back and cook. So I did just that. I didn't have my phone or anything or my wallet, just a handful of coins. And then the door closed behind me, and I realized immediately I didn't have my keys. I was locked out. And it was the dead of winter. So I had like 3 pounds in my pajamas. There was snow on the ground. This is December. And I had to figure out a way to get back into my flat. What I should have done was just call my wife and be like, can you come? Like, she was at work, and I should have said, can you come let me in? But I didn't want to bother her. So I had to go on this kind of epic journey to get to my estate agents, which was several miles away, using these 3 coins or 350 or whatever I had strategically. So I went to an internet cafe first to look up their number, and then I had to call them to make sure they could let me in, or to get them to come, and they were like, we can't come over there, but you can come get your key. And I was like, all right. So I had to get on the overground. I had to sneak on because I didn't have enough money to pay the fare. I got to the estate agent.
In your pajamas?
In my pajamas, in the, I don't know, 5 degrees outside.
So you probably think you snuck on, but what happened is the guard took one look at you and went, I'm just going to let him go on. He's getting pretty weird.
I think luckily there weren't any officers or whatever there. But anyway, we got to the estate agent, picked up the key, snuck on the overground, back home, got there. The key was the wrong key. It was they gave me the wrong set of keys. So I was like, oh my God. At this point, it had already been about 2-3 hours, like this journey there and back and everything, and it was getting to the dark outside, and I was just like, I can't keep doing this. So I went to the dentist downstairs from my flat, and I asked, can I use your phone and your internet, because I forgot the number for this agent again. So I called them, and they were like, oh my God, and then I had to wait in the dentist waiting area for 45 minutes or something, and they came, and they gave me the right key, and then at the end of this, I just felt like crying. Like I was so tired and cold. But anyway, I was like, no, I gotta do this. So I cooked everything, got it done in 3 hours. And yeah, that's...
So then on the TV show, there was less pressure because you weren't in your PJs and tired and
exactly.
cold. Yeah.
Yeah. No, but the final was... And also, because I tanked it in a previous challenge, and it wasn't an elimination challenge, it was already in the finals. I did so badly on one of the challenges in Australia that when I got to the final, I was like, well, I'm not going to win anyway, so I'm just going to cook this food best I can and have a bit of fun. And I think actually all 3 of us, me, Tom, and Sarah, were in a similar kind of mindset. So it was, that one didn't feel like so much pressure. That one felt like fun, actually.
Did you cooked a burger for your winning dish, didn't you?
3 burgers.
3 burgers.
I did burgers for the starter.
I love to start with a burger.
Yeah.
My start is always a burger.
Especially when you knew a burger's
3
coming.
burgers.
3 little sliders, then ramen, and then a little selection of British desserts, which I think I love British desserts. So sticky toffee pudding and cheesecake and stuff like that. And then I won.
Congratulations.
To everyone's surprise. Yeah.
8 years later. Congratulations.
Yeah.
So how did that then lead you to... I mean, the reason we got you on is to talk about your restaurant. We haven't got anywhere near it. But what was your journey then from Masterchef winner to opening Nanban?
For the first year, you get a lot of offers for odd jobs and stuff. Like just because people want to have a Masterchef champion to do their thing. So I did a lot of those. Obviously, at the end of that first year, then there's a new winner. So... she gets all the offers.
So you get a year of doing cool stuff,
of,
and then
easy money, basically, or rather, you get a year of people coming to you just because they know you. You're the most recent guy. You're the one whose face they remember. Anyway, after that, I was like, well, I got to get serious about doing something now. So I pitched a cookbook and also started doing pop-ups for the restaurant. There were a lot of false starts with that, but there were like a lot of investors pulling out and premises falling through. I first started doing non-bond pop-ups in 2012, and we didn't open until 2015.
Where was the first pop-up?
It was in Hammersmith at a pub run by a friend of mine. But what made non-bond happen was a pop-up I did in Brixton, because I was looking around East London, like Hackney and Shoreditch and stuff. Because at that point there weren't any other ramen shops there. Now we have Tonkotsu and Bone Daddies, and I think Shorty.
Chain ones.
Yeah. No, there's nothing wrong. I like those guys, but yeah. So I wanted to open around here. Brixton wasn't really on the radar, but then I did this pop-up in Brixton, and it went well. And the guys who ran that pub bought another site, and they were like, "Do you want to do it in Brixton?" And I was like.
Was that
maybe.
In the village?
No, we're just out. We're not in the market. We're outside the market on Cold Harbor Lane, in a really beautiful building actually from 1921. It's one of the because
It's quite ornate on the outside.
It is, yeah.
Ridges, isn't it?
Like, we didn't know, because the previous owners really didn't take care of it. Like, and it was covered in layers and layers of paint, and the floor had probably 4 different floors, all just piled on top of each other. So we didn't really know. We knew it was an old building, but we didn't know what we'd find. And we found this gilded theater restaurant sign, because there used to be a theater opposite. We had the big window on the upstairs dipped in acid. We found the original terrazzo floor underneath, which is in pretty good shape, especially on the first floor. And we just restored whatever we could with our budget. And yeah, we're lucky to have that building, because it's really cool. And also, especially considering like Brixton's had so many riots and fires and stuff, like it's lucky that building exists at all. So yeah, it's a beautiful place. And we recently expanded as well into the premises next door to us, increasing our capacity to over 100 covers, which is crazy.
Amazing.
But yeah, but it's good.
Is there plans for a number 2?
No.
that was very...
We're always looking for
Sound
opportunities.
like Beaver Town there.
We're always looking for opportunities, but I don't know that Nanban is like roll out ready. I really don't think of it as a kind of restaurant that you could just put in a different place and it would work. I think it's very Brixton specific, and that's actually come from a lot of it's part of it was we went into it with this attitude that we want to engage with the market in particular and the local food culture that's been here for decades. We don't want to just be another restaurant in Brixton that could be anywhere. We want to be a Brixton restaurant. And then as we, we're almost 3 years in now. As we went on, we realized it's not just about what we can get in Brixton, it's also about what the customers in Brixton want. So we've changed the menu in that direction as well. And it's hard to take out a few of what are really our core and biggest selling dishes and imagine them
anywhere
in
else,
a Westfield. Plantain katsu curry is one of our biggest sellers. And we have a dish called the leopard, which is this incredibly strange ramen with burnt garlic oil and Parmesan cheese and Scotch bonnet bamboo shoots and stuff. And it's
that's all the umami.
It's great, yeah. And it's our biggest seller in terms of ramen, almost in terms of anything. But I don't know if that would work somewhere else, even though it really works in Brixton. So I don't know. I've always wanted to take Nanban and put it in another area that has a really cool local food culture that we can kind of draw on. I always thought Green Lanes would be a really cool place for a Nanban, because we could take over an old Turkish grill and use their charcoal setup and do giant yakitori and Japanese grilled dishes. I think that would be really fun.
Do that.
Yeah. But it's got to be exactly the right kind of place and offer for it to be a Nanban, I feel like. So no. But like I say, if something interesting comes up, we'll do it. We did street food last summer at a few different places, which was fun. But it's always going to be a temporary thing.
And I suppose why we invited you here today was to talk about the beer there and beer in the restaurant industry. Yeah. It's sort of a bit of a strange thing, and I think it seems slightly lost at the moment. It's getting so much better than what it was, but it sort of is a bit of a side thing for most restaurants, and they never have the focus.
It's a bizarre situation, because most people, I'm talking anecdotally here, but I feel like most people, when they sit down and have dinner at home on a weekday, they're having a beer with it. They're not having a glass of wine. Maybe at the weekend they switch over to the wine, and it's a bit of an occasion. But lots of people enjoy beer and food together and never see them as connected.
No. But do you, I'll throw it back at you guys, because I realized, I used to think, because we started off with a really kind of specific beer list at Nanban, which, well, first of all, we started off with a lot of collaborations, and I've always been lucky to have had those opportunities to do that. Obviously, the Pressure Drop is the big one. The one we have is our core house beer. But yeah, we had Chris Mayer, who runs the Hanging Bat. He did an amazing beer for us. Quantum, R.I.P., did us a purple sweet potato Scotch bonnet mild, which was amazing.
Amazing.
We'll talk about Nanban Kampai as well, the Pressure Drop one, just briefly.
So Nanban Kampai started off, so Graham from Pressure Drop, one of the founders, was the cellarman at the Euston Tap before he went on to start Pressure Drop. And he asked me, in very, very early days when they were basically in a garage in Stoke Newington with like a 50-liter, what would be considered a pilot kit, basically. Yeah. He asked me if I wanted to come do a beer, and I was like, yeah. And I really wanted to do a purple sweet potato beer because I'd had this purple sweet potato beer in Japan, which had this amazing like roasted sweet potato aroma, and it's this bright purple color. And I was like, let's try this. And we never got it to work. We tried everything. We tried roasting the potatoes, boiling them in, like mashing in with them. We tried dry potatoing.
I think that would have been a non-starter, though.
Yeah, and
dry
we did.
Potatoing is like great. It's good name for a beer, actually.
We did get a bit of the flavor in the end, but we never got the lovely purple color.
Right.
But anyway, then at another event, I can't remember what year it was, but it was a 4th of July dinner, and I wanted to cook Wisconsin food, and Wisconsin is also famous for cranberries. So I was like, I really want to do like a hoppy, strong wheat beer with cranberry juice for a little bit of acidity and a nice pink color. And we made it, and it was called Wisconsin Wheat, and it was delicious. And then that became Nanban Kampai. We took the same beer, which is full of like Amarillo hops and Bavarian yeast, and instead of the cranberry juice, we pitched yuzu, orange, and grapefruit, and this became our house beer, Nanban Kampai, which is it's very popular. I know it's popular for them, which is great because they keep it as part of their core range now, and it goes with all our food really well. Like even though it's a strongly flavored beer, it's got sort of the right balance of everything, so that it kind of goes with everything. It's bitter, but it's not super bitter or too bitter. It's tart, but it's not like a sour beer, and it's got a nice body to it. Like it's got that lovely sort of chewy wheat beer, frothy body to it. But yeah, no, beer's tough. It really is. And I used to think, because I was going to say to you, both of you, like, I know you guys obviously like beer, and you want to have it with food, but when you have it with food, do you actually think, like on a regular basis, is this going to be good together, or am I drinking the right thing with the right food?
So I do now.
Yeah.
What I would say is I always used to drink beer in the pubs. Back before I really got into beer, I'd always drink beer in pubs when I had food. And I always used to think you'd get to dessert and you'd have something sweet, and then you'd have a sip of beer and you'd be like, that is rancid. So I kind of learned quite early on that even if they're not necessarily connected, they can disconnect quite easily. Yeah. Like that bitterness just hits you in the face after you've had something really sweet.
Right.
So I've always known that really we should be paying a little bit more attention to what we're drinking when we're eating.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, back then I wouldn't specifically pick a bitter if I was having a stew, or pick an IPA if I was having pulled pork or whatever it is. That's something that sort of slowly crept into me, and that was due to the education that I sort of undertook myself through the craft beer channel and stuff. So I'm always keen to try and jumpstart that education in people on the channel. So we do a lot of cooking with beer, a lot of food and beer matching, and if we're ever eating on the channel, we always say, hey, this would be sweet with a whatever it is.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, Rob.
Yeah. Well, I sometimes just do it the wrong way around. So it's like you're drinking a beer and you're like, oh man, this would go so well with like a big stew.
Right.
And like you do it in reverse order, and there's a lot more seldomly you'd eat food and go, oh, this certain style of beer would be good, be nice with this. And yeah, it's just how I sort of think, and I know a lot of people think like that when they're drinking beer. There's often references to food and what will go well with it.
Yeah.
But a lot.
I think there's an extra issue because beer is so varied. If you cook something, generally in my fridge I have lager, pale ale, IPA, and probably a lambic chilled in the bit where I sort of age my beers. Those are basically my three options.
Right.
So often I'll drink something and go, eat something and go, I wish I had a Flemish Red, or I had a fruited Goza or something. But you don't keep that stock really chilled in your house. Whereas with wine, I think it's a little bit easier. You go, well, I need a red for this, a really fruity red or a really oaky red.
Yeah.
And generally you might have it there. I don't know.
But this is the thing, and I've noticed this about myself recently, is like when I drink beer with a meal, I'm not necessarily thinking like, I have to have a specific thing. I just need something that I know won't be bad. And usually that's the one that's like kind of the least, it's like
probably a lager.
Yeah. So I used to think we had a specific problem at Nanban, which is that nobody was interested in good beer, particularly with the food. And we started off, like I said, with this kind of strange super specific beer list, which was I was trying to cover a broad range of flavors and styles, but also I wanted things that would go with specific kinds of food. Like we had in Rochefort 8 back then, which is a really, really weird beer for a Japanese restaurant. Let's be honest. But it went really well with our curry goat. Like it was a great beer for rich, spicy food. We had in Yadokai the 13% crazy 5-way collaboration I did with Wild Beer and Hanging Bat, which is always going to be a tough sell. I mean, it's a very wacky beer. But obviously, it's brewed to be like a sake. It's very umami. It's got a bit of yuzu in it, and it went great with sort of our more traditional Japanese stuff. So there was a lot of thought that I put into my beer list. And then I was upset when people weren't ordering Rochefort 8, you know? We had in Dragon Stout as well, like the classic Jamaican punchy stout, which went with a lot of our more Caribbean.
Where do you buy that from? Because every offie has one. But
we literally got it from the offie.
Oh, really?
Yeah. We bought it in,
just some ghost distributor no one's ever met, just bringing in
because even
hectoliters of it.
Even the offie didn't really know where to get it. He was like, I just get it from a cash and carry. I was like, well, I should go
probably
to the cash
dusting the bottle off as he gives it to you as well. You're the only guy drinking it.
That stuff is fighting juice as well. But so over time I was like, well, a lot of these aren't working. And also I remember we had Hitachino Nest on. I think it was the Classic Ale, which is one of my all-time favorite beers, and I think the cedar flavor of it is just perfect for a lot of Japanese food. But we wound up having to put that on offer because it was going on a date. And I was like, this is tragic, man. And I checked the figures, like what was selling, and we have only space for one draft line at Nanban, and it's Kirin, because they gave... Well, I like Kirin, for one thing, I should say that. Of the Japanese lagers, that's probably my favorite. But they gave us a loan to build the bar, so they're our house beer. And I'm very happy to have them as our house beer. But that outsells everything, like, incredibly. Like, even the food. If you check the sales figures, Kirin is number one. It sells more than the Karage, it sells more than any other
That's by
ramen.
cash taken through the till.
That's by quantity.
Right.
And probably cash taken. Haven't checked that one. But what I realized is people aren't thinking about food. And even I'm not. Like if I'm going to have a meal like at a place like Nanban, or I was at Bretto's recently, Bretto's Tacos, which is amazing food. But I was like, well, I'm actually ordering a bunch of different things with a bunch of different flavors. So I want to get in the thing that's just going to go with all of them, so I don't really have to worry too much. Which Kirin fits the bill perfectly because it's very close to sparkling water. Let's be real. Like it's super bland. It's really refreshing and it's good beer. It's well made, but there's not much to it. So it's an easy choice. It's also our cheapest beer. But yeah, people just, and I myself, even as a beer geek, like I'm not being that specific about it, so I can't blame people if they're not saying, oh, I want that one with this dish and that one with that dish. They just want a beer that's going to be okay. So like, I realize we're never going to sell dark beers. We have never, like they've always been poor sellers, just because that's not what people think of when they go for food. It's always got to be light. And now that's how I do the beer list. I've got to be a little bit more commercial about it. Otherwise, we end up just having beer sit on the shelves, which is not fair for anybody.
Well, that's an interesting point, actually, because maybe that is the problem. If you go to a fancy restaurant with a great wine list,
It's too much.
Look at their sales figures, though. It's probably house wine, or
the second cheapest if you're really splashing out.
Yeah. If you're me. But if you look at the exciting wines that they're known for, they probably sell very little. But the glory of wine is that doesn't matter if they're not getting through it. It's sitting there. It's getting better with age, whatever.
Yeah, that's the thing
but
with wine.
Beer, you know,
unless it's
if
alambic.
you've got a Hikachina Nest that's really nice, that is going to be in the bottom 5% of your sales, much like the fine wine.
Exactly.
But you need to sell that within 3 months, or else you're in trouble. And maybe that is the reason why. That's the problem. Like, I would say the sales mix of all those restaurants, they're still going to be 80% cheap wine.
Yeah.
But also, people are very, very drawn to brands that they know and recognize. So Kirin is one. Nanban, Kanpai. People might not know Pressure Drop, but if you're in Nanban, you know Nanban. So you can probably get that beer. Brixton, we sell a lot of Brixton. Now we have Electric IPA, and used to be Atlantic. We did a collaboration with them, which was fantastic, using hibiscus and green tea. But yeah, people will go for the ones that they know. That's the other thing, and it's true with wine as well. I think because we recently switched the drinks menu to list the wines because I was sick of people just getting the cheapest ones, and I was like, we have good wines or decent wines anyway. I want people to order some different wines, so I started listing them by grape varietal instead of by the name of the winery, which people don't know them. And it's worked. It's like people are now ordering more Sauvignon Blancs and Riesling and stuff. But the thing is, like, you shouldn't really drink red wine at my restaurant. It goes with almost nothing. But people still do it. Like, people just want red wine. So
yeah, lots of people don't like white wine, like the acidity to it. They're just like, no, I'm a red drinker.
Exactly. And, like, you can't blame them for that. And it's not going to ruin the food or anything. But I think that generally, I think it's a myth that people are doing the same thing with wine. I think that some people go into a restaurant, they look at the list, they're like, oh, I know that, or that wine, that grape will be good with this. But wine is complicated too, like vintages and regions, and like you don't really know, even if you know the grape varietal or something or the region. I think very few people really have that kind of thought process as wine as well. But the wine industry or community has done a better job of positioning it that way, you know?
So you genuinely think that people aren't going into a restaurant and necessarily picking their wine exactly to their food either? It's the whole food and alcohol matching is a little bit of a myth as well.
Very much.
That wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah.
I've never done it with wine, and I only do it with beer if I'm in the right place or I'm at home and I know I've got the right thing in, basically.
Yeah. So I used to get quite frustrated at Namban because I was like, why aren't people drinking my delicious, very carefully selected beer? But now I just realize that that's not true of any drink, I think.
So here's a question.
Yeah.
Why do you keep having specialty beer? If you could just have Kirin,
I have asked myself
would you do
this
better,
a lot.
do you think?
Actually, the biggest question for me is sake. Because sake is really the thing to drink at Namban. It goes with everything. It's delicious. We have a really good sake list. But nobody drinks it. Like, we'll sell very, very little sake because people know even less about that than they do beer. So I was like, why don't I just slash this menu down and just have 2 sake, or why don't I just have 4 beer? And the reasons is because, one, I think that's part of who we are. It's just like, it is, like, we want people, even if they don't go for it, we want people to have the best possible.
Yeah, it's like the wine that's $1,000 on the list and you'll sell 1 a year.
I mean, and that's great, but that's not even our best wine, probably. And, like, the most expensive stuff isn't necessarily the best. But, like, we want people... I want people to have a good time, and that comes from having what I think is the best possible product, you know? And that includes drink. Drink is a big part of that. So we need to have this stuff there for people who do want it and who do care and who do think about it. And... like, it might not be as sort of specific or as niche or whatever as I would like, but then I'm not even that kind of person as well. Like, I often, when I'm at Namban, I'll just drink Kirin or Kanpai as well. And the thing is, like, we do have specialist beer, but it's not as special as it used to be. Like I said, we had to go for brands that people tend to recognize more and respond to what customers want. Like, people would come in and they say, what Japanese beers do you have? Which is a fair question at a Japanese restaurant. We say, well, only Kirin. Which is how Hitachino wound up back on the list, because they started selling their lager in cans here. James Clay's doing it. So we got that, and that's selling a lot better, because we can point to it on the menu and say, there's another Japanese beer for you. And because it's a lager, people are... it's very accessible. Yeah. It's what they have in mind with a Japanese beer. So, but it's still very good and a lovely can. Everybody likes the owl.
So, leading on from that, you as a consumer, so you're picking somewhere for dinner. Do you look at beer lists, or would you go to somewhere where you've been told the beer list is amazing, food's also great? For food, yeah.
No, because there have been a few restaurants in the past few years that have opened and say they specialize in beer, and they have good lists and everything. But then you get there and it's not actually that good.
Yeah, I've got a bit of an issue with this, and I've been to a few places like around Soho and stuff. Yeah, and they've got a printed list, and there's things like Cloudwater on it. It's
right.
And you know that's gone.
They make a different beer every time, and how have you got this on the list? And there's a few other things that I've noticed like that are creeping up. And obviously they've been told this beer, been told that's fine, printed these lists, and then it's just not there or not available. And we work with so many small breweries, and it's really hard to get stock consistently off them. Like, they're tiny.
Yeah,
they're
of course.
brewing, like, you talked about pressure drop there.
Yeah.
We were brewing on a 5-barrel kit. And I think sometimes it's easy to remove yourself from that and just think that every brewery is massive and it's just constant stream of bottles just rolling out, and it's not.
And it's becoming increasingly common for breweries to not have a core range as well.
Yeah.
So like we got in Burning Sky this year, and it's their seasonal saisons that we're stocking. So we just put on the menu seasonal saison. Ask your server for details. It's not selling.
Yeah, I think because you add that extra level of complexity, you have to ask. Then
it's also one of the most
person.
expensive beers on our list as well.
Yeah, but it's also Burning Sky Saison, so I'm going to bloody ask
That's
next
the
time
thing.
I'm in.
Because for me, it's like, this is one of the best breweries in the UK ever.
Yeah.
But then I was like, well, if people want that, I probably should have got Colonel, because they're also
well, that's it. Actually,
know them.
Colonel is an incredibly common beer on restaurant lists in London, at the very least. It's I think because you can just go Colonel IPA, and lots of people won't notice that the hop's completely different to the last one they had. But also because it is, because of Colonel's business model, because of the way that Evan runs it, he wants to make sure that London's well supplied.
Right,
and it means that you can always get hold of Colonel.
Yeah. I mean, and the table beer is like the good equivalent of Kirin. It's like, it just goes with everything, but it also happens to be a great beer.
Yeah.
And it's not very strong, which is a bonus.
So if you get a table beer, the clue's in the name, I guess.
Yeah.
Maybe if there were more table beers being made, and I think there is, with the trend for lower ABV beers, there's lots more table beers being made, particularly now that we're experimenting a bit more with yeasts and getting flavour at lower ABV.
Yeah, I drank the Brick table beer last night, actually, and it's tasting really, really good. It's just like 3%.
Yeah. But then
Smasher.
the problem is everybody just goes for that one,
Yeah.
And they ignore the rest of the list. But getting back to your question about like how if I think about beer when I go out to eat, I choose restaurants based on the food, and then if they happen to have good beer, I'm like, this is a bonus. Like Somsa and Bretto's again. Bretto's had a really good list, dominated by Magic Rock, which is no bad thing. I'd like to have seen a little bit more of a range in places like that, but like Somsa, maybe my favorite restaurant in the world at this point. Actually, they have Magic Rock and they have wild beer, and they do a really like solid job. You're not going to find anything particularly weird there necessarily, or really like geeky, but you don't need that. So when I find a restaurant that's got great food and they have good beer, I'm like, this is amazing. This is all I want. But I'm also like, I'm a real advocate of drinking what's best with the food. So, like, I wouldn't go to a French restaurant and be like, why don't you have any good beer here? And just ignore the wine, Like, in Japan, if you go to an izakaya, they'll have probably one beer, and one of each wine. They'll have a red wine and a white wine. They'll usually just list it as that on the menu. And then dozens of sakes and shochu. Because that's what you drink. Like, if I go to a Caribbean restaurant, I'm probably going to drink Red Stripe or a rum cocktail. Like that's just what matches the food. And this is the thing. Like going back to Nanban, fair enough, you're drinking Kirin, because this is absolutely what you'd be drinking in Japan.
Yeah.
So if you go to a classic gastro pub, are you going to pick a British bitter or pale?
Oh yeah. I would have like a Fuller's ESB or something. In fact, one of my earliest and favorite British dining experiences was down in Devon. I was visiting some friends of my wife's who lived down there. We went to a pub, can't remember the name of the pub, ordered a beef shin pie, and had some delicious, strong malty bitter with it, and it was perfect, like beautiful. So that's the thing, and I'm not reaching for an ESB most of the time. Like if I'm just drinking beer, I tend to drink different stuff. But
I guess the thing to sort of learn is that there is a connection there, but maybe you connect the whole food culture, take a holistic approach, and you go, right, people around here mostly drink this, which means if we're drinking food traditional to this area, then I should probably order that with the local food. You don't have to necessarily look at each menu and go, each dish on the menu and go, well, I'll have that with that, that with that, that with that. A bitter probably would go with your, what's a classic British starter, like a pate, and then a beef shin pie.
Or a ploughman's lunch.
Bitter would be
greatest
lovely,
British dish there is.
But it usually comes on a board.
People always ask me on podcasts, for example, like, what would your your last meal be? Or
What's your perfect Sunday?
Lots of Kieran. No. But I always say I would have ramen and probably a good lobster mac and cheese for my last meal. But I've always said I want a Plowman's with a lot of barley wine. I think that would just send me right off, and I'd be very happy.
Craft beer will truly hit the mainstream when a final meal is a dude saying, "I want barley wine and a cheese ball." Basically,
Plowman's and a barley wine, please.
This is achievable. Like, you can go to a Fuller's pub and probably get a Plowman's, and they'll probably have Golden Pride. That's your evening sorted, man, or your lunch,
or your last meal ever.
Yeah.
So before me and Rob deconstruct that conversation, I thought it would be worth just flagging the fact that you can get us on at Beer Merchants and at Craft Beer Channel, and on Facebook for both and Instagram for both, to get this conversation going, because what he said was pretty controversial, and I wonder whether other people match beer like I do on the channel, or like most people do in talks that you go to, going, well, you should have a Gers with this and then an IPA with this and a brown ale with your pudding, or whether you go, I'm in a pub, so I'm going to have a bitter, I'm in a izakaya, I'm going to have a Kirin, whether there's a more holistic, almost geographical approach to it.
Yeah, I suppose the big thing I got out of that was sort of thinking about it more. And do I go to a restaurant because the beer list is really good? Probably not. Do I go to a restaurant with a good beer list and come away slightly happier? Definitely. But I don't think it really sways your judgment. It does 100% in pubs. Every single time I go to a pub, I think about that, and it's,
And all pubs should have their bloody beer list online so that you can look. It's one of my biggest bugbears. I want to know what you serve.
But it's so important. But you go to a restaurant to eat primarily, and if you can have really nice beer when you're there, even better. But I did find that fascinating, that it is the secondary thing. And I also, the sort of sell-by date thing, I just never thought of it like that before.
Yeah, I mean, so working through Cave, we know that selling to restaurants is tricky because they don't get through the volume, so minimum orders aren't met, or they can't make the GP work and that kind of stuff. So we kind of knew it, but yeah, I mean, the fact that he couldn't even sell Rochefort, which is a beautiful beer, and beer I think it has 3 years shelf life on it. The fact that he was struggling to sell that within its date is...
It's mad, yeah. And probably tastes really good.
It probably still tasted great, but
completely. And you just don't think about that with wine. It's sort of risk-free, shoving a 300-pound bottle of wine on your menu, or even an 80-pound bottle of wine on your menu, because if no one drinks it, no one drinks it. You've only bought 6 bottles, and it'll be fine, and it will be fine, and it will be fine for years to come. Whereas beer, especially what's sort of trendy right now, the expensive beers, like people like Cloudwater are only putting 3 months on their IPAs, which, is fine. They want people to drink it fresh, but how are restaurants supposed to guarantee that they'll go through 25 cans?
Yeah. It does make me laugh that Cloudwater have put 3 months on their table beer, and you're like, it's a table beer. Like, it's supposed to be on the table, and yet you're putting dates on it that mean that nobody can put it on their table.
But that is crazy. I actually sell to a really lovely account up in North London called the Bull and Last, and they have kind of got around it, and I never thought of it like this before, but they just have loads of lambic in their fridge that they get off.
100%. I've said that in talks. Like, if you get in beers with really long dates, if anything, they get more exciting as they go along rather than getting worse. So it's great for low volume.
They just put on their draft pretty accessible beer. It's good beer, but it's very accessible. And then they leave their fridges to be absolutely mad, and they'll buy very small quantities off us, and he doesn't do it to sell lots, but it's risk-free because that Tilquin Goose has probably been sitting in the fridge for a year, but it's going to be tasting absolutely banging. So, maybe that is how people should start looking at it a bit more. Do take risks, but just on the stuff that keeps longer, because beer just doesn't have the same shelf life most of the time than the wine industry does, and therefore you're not taking as big a punt.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess there needs to be a balance between sort of the dream view, which is that everyone would stop stop selling wine in restaurants and start selling beer. That'd be brilliant news for the beer industry. But that's not going to happen, and B, it probably shouldn't happen. So we just need to be more realistic, and then we can start marketing and selling and, as a drinker, promoting it to your mates. Realistically, you can start going, we're going to go to a classic pub, let's have a bitter instead of a wine. Whereas I'd probably go to a club? No, never. Go to a pub and say, well, we'll have a bitter with that. But then, they've got an IPA in the fridge and they've got this, which probably automatically turns people off anyway. But also, do you really want to drink 4 different beers with your meal? Wouldn't you just, if you're in a nice pub, really just have an ESB?
Well, yeah, you don't tend to drink as much in a restaurant, so that's the sort of major difference as well. You're eating and you'll only have 1 or 2 beers, so throughput is just not the same as well. But I also found it really interesting talking about sort of menu placement and where to put things like his wine list, how he lists it and how big a change it does, and it kind of pointed out to me and reminded me of me when he just says people don't have a clue. Because when I go to a restaurant and pick wine, I'm always the second cheapest type of guy, because I just don't, I wish I knew more about wine, but I really don't, so it's so hard to know.
And I think putting tasting notes is so helpful for me when I go to buy wine, because then it might still be a crap wine, but I know there'll be some strawberry or some oak in there, whatever I'm looking for. And we do it at the tap. We make sure that there's tasters there, because we get people coming in who have no clue what these breweries are, what these beers are, what these styles are. But if you tell them, there's pine and citrus, they might go, oh, well, I had a beer a bit like that once. And it's true across all alcohol, the whole alcohol spectrum. People need help. They're big worlds. Yeah,
and because restaurants are a bit more broad, like a craft beer bar, 9 times out of 10, at least one of the group are going to be really into the beer, so they're going to be able to help and advise. But restaurants aren't like that. They attract a different audience. So having a little bit more info maybe is important. And I think the way he said listing it was really fascinating. Don't do it by price. There's other ways you can do it, be it by style or alphabetically even, and just give info on the beer.
Because it's not cheapskates like you going, well, I'm not going to be a proper cheapskate,
The good thing about beer, though, is the cost is usually not as grand as wine. You're not going to...
And it's all within a margin of, 7 or 8 quid.
Yeah, exactly. So you're not going to get stung and be like, could I have that beer? And it's going to cost £200.
Yep.
Unless you buy a Magnum of Dreifontein.
Well, yeah. Well, I wish there were restaurants that had that. Although the tap does have street food at the weekends and Magnums. So that was, that was really, really interesting. And as a complete nerd as well, it was interesting to hear about the Masterchef experience. That story about him getting locked out is just incredible. And the fact he won it after that is just blows my mind. A really interesting guy. If you haven't been to Nanban, it is absolutely awesome. The beer list is now smaller, as you could probably imagine, but still has some really nice beers on there. And the Nanban Kampai that he brews with...
it's so good.
With Pressure Drop, it's a really good beer. So do get down to Nanban if you can. And that rhymes. And also we did a video with Tim on the Craft Beer channel, which we made a beer katsu, which is bloody delicious. So you can check out that. We'll put that in the show notes. Anything to add, Rob?
I think that's everything, other than none of us have a clue. Sort of, was that the outcome of that? No one knows what they're doing when they're choosing alcohol in a restaurant, so don't bother trying.
Yeah. Just keep it simple, keep it geographical or seasonal, and don't worry too much about offering this hugely complex experience of matching a beer with every single course. That's not necessarily how people want to drink. Make sure that your beer list is small and perfectly formed, like you think with a menu as well. You don't want 100 dishes to choose from. And that way you'll get through the beer before it goes out of date, and the customers that come in will understand what on earth they've got themselves in for, which to me now makes perfect sense, but until that hour chat we had, I'd have probably argued him down.
Yeah, 100%. And back to the fill your fridge with stuff that lasts long.
Mm-hmm.
That's where you go big, I think, because if you go too big on the hoppy stuff, you just run the risk of not getting through it, because not by a long stretch will everybody in your restaurant be buying beer. And for those type of beers, freshness is so important. So take the risks on the stuff you can age, and then keep a really quality but trimmed down fresh section, I suppose.
Yep.
And you can always add to it, which I often tell this to customers as well in bars.
You start here and you grow.
Yeah, it's a lot easier to grow than take away.
Yeah.
Without wasting stuff. So I think that is the way to do it.
Yeah. There you go. Sound advice from the bubble. That is the end of episode 2. Hope you enjoyed that one. Please do check out the various Twitters and Facebooks that we have. They're all in the show notes. And join us for episode 3.
I love that stuff. Been drinking it for years. Drinking it for years. Drinking it for years. Drinking it for years. You know, I heard they recently decided to add more hops to it. Hops to it. You know, I heard they recently decided to add more hops to it. Hops to it. Chica, yeah, figure,